Hello and welcome to the Entertainment Gig Podcast and Music Edition, episode number 9. My name is Cleon. On this week's episode, we discuss the Country Music Awards. We start our Grammy nomination coverage by looking back at some past omissions, and we make the case for inducting Joan Baez into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay, let's start off with some news, and there's a lot of it. Starting off with the Country Music Awards, which were announced this past week. Garth Brooks ended up taking the Entertainer of the Year award, which was the big one for the night. Other winners of the major awards were Chris Stapleton, Carrie Underwood, Eric Church, and Lori McKenna. However, that is not the part that made the most news for the past week. Beyoncé showed up at the awards as a quote-unquote surprise guest in order to do a duet with the Dixie Chicks for Beyoncé's single Daddy Lessons. Here's where the problem starts. They had made a big deal about it, they being the Country Music Association, had made a big deal about Beyoncé being there. They were touting it as a huge deal. They promoted it like crazy. And due to our politics in this country, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a lot of backlash. How dare they have Beyoncé on there because she supports the Black Lives Matter movement? And so, not only did the Country Music Association cave in to the backlash, they erased Beyoncé from all their tweets, their website. Unless there was some sort of video, of which there was, of the actual performance, you wouldn't have known that Beyoncé had even shown up at this thing, the way that they basically erased all evidence of her being there on their social media and even in their press releases, which I find rather funny, only because of the fact that the same people who were complaining about Beyoncé's support for the Black Lives Matter movement, people such as the Blue Lives Matter and the All Lives Matter movement, have been noticeably quiet since a white nationalist went and shot and killed and ambushed 2 white police officers in Iowa. So, in terms of the supposed outrage of the whole Beyoncé matter, it just doesn't seem to wash with their message. However, the Dixie Chicks did not take kindly to the matter. They basically made fun of the whole thing, and I suspect that will probably be the last time that you will ever see the Dixie Chicks show up at the Country Music Association Awards or any other country music awards, apparently. For Beyoncé's part, she's been rather quiet about the whole situation. Take the high road, I guess. Don't know if I would have done the same, but that's just me. In other news, Bono has made history. He is Glamour magazine's very first Man of the Year. They did not do a Woman of the Year issue this year. Instead, in a first, they gave it to a man. Bono's a worthy winner of the award for all the philanthropy that he's done. I'm just not quite sure if Glamour magazine is I would have given it to a woman. It's a woman's magazine, but in a weird way, progress, I guess, sort of. In other weird political news this past week, South Korean K-pop stars are finding themselves in the middle of a big presidential political scandal, which amazingly has nothing to do with America. This one concerns the family of Choi Soon-sil, who is extremely connected to the president of South Korea and is accused of manipulating and using their influence in the entertainment industry in South Korea, specifically K-pop. It's a fascinating article. I had no idea that this was a huge scandal over there. Choi Soon-sil has actually been arrested, and a number of heads are going down on this one, and it could actually bring down the South Korean president. I will link the article to the show notes in case you want to read more up on it, but this is a fascinating thing which I'm trying to figure out how this would actually play in America, but it was very interesting. In other news, deadmau5 has announced that his new album will actually be released on December 2nd. If you've been following his Twitter feed, you will have noted that he has been working on it rather out in public for a little while now, putting the finishing touches on it, doing live sessions. This is what I love about social media and about deadmau5 in particular, is that he shows you the process, and he is very open about working on new product in front of people, which is great. He is one of the most social people out there in terms of social media. You should follow his Twitter feed. It's an amazing insight into the musical process. In some sad news, singer Michael Bublé has announced that he is taking a break from music to care for his son, who has cancer. His son is 3 years old. To have cancer at any age is bad. To have it at 3 is utterly devastating, and we wish his family well and hope that his son is cured from whichever form of cancer this actually is. In other sad but happy news, Sting will be the first artist to play Paris's Bataclan on November 12th, actually. For those of you with a very short memory, the Bataclan is the club where terrorists killed 90 people, among other people, in the big Paris attacks back in, I believe it was December of last year or late November of last year. So they're going to reopen the club, and Sting is the first artist to play there. And last but not least, Dick Clark Productions, who do the Billboard Music Awards and also the American Music Awards, among many other things. Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, that sort of thing. The company has been sold to a Chinese group called the Wanda Group, which is, I guess, a private equity fund who is beginning to make roads into the Hollywood entertainment industry by buying up a lot of media companies, including along with Alibaba, who are also making inroads into the Hollywood entertainment industry. And pouring a little out for a homie this week, the Black Keys keyboardist Eddie Harsh has passed away at the age of 59. No cause of death was given. He, however, was the keyboardist during the Black Crowes' heyday with Shake Your Moneymaker and a couple other albums in the early 90s when they were huge. So Eddie Harsh passed away, keyboardist for the Black Crowes. Okay, for the next few weeks, we're going to be doing a run-up to the Grammy Award nominations, which are going to be on December 8th, if I'm not mistaken. This week, we're going to go over some big omissions that the Grammy Awards have done in the past, including one that is not their fault this year, but will be made into a huge deal. Frank Ocean came out with 2 albums this past year, both of which were made well in advance of the September 30th cutoff date for new submissions to the Grammy Awards. The way that the situation works is that either the recording companies or the labels or their management companies of the artists have to put in submissions for the artists in order to be considered for any Grammy Awards. Now, depending on whose story you go with, Frank Ocean's management either did decide to put in a submission or did not decide to put in a submission. I'm not quite sure who to believe on this particular situation, but in any event, neither of Frank Ocean's albums will be eligible for the Grammy Awards, even though he was pretty much a lock to at least get a bunch of nominations and maybe even win a few. One album would have easily have made the cut, which is Blonde, which is the latest one that came out. There was another one that he did, which technically isn't an album per se, but is a long-form album video. Excuse me. And the video would have made it a little bit ineligible for things like album of the year, that sort of thing. Not quite sure how that would have worked out, but you don't have to worry about it anymore because neither that one nor Blonde are actually going to be in the running this year. For Kanye West's part, because the world is about Kanye, he has announced that if Frank Ocean is not nominated for any awards, that he is not going to show up for the Grammy Awards, which at last check they had booted him out and banned him from going to the awards a few years ago when he went up on stage yet again. So I'm not quite sure how that works out. In any event, nothing is forever in Hollywood, including bands anyway, so be it. However, this is not the first time that a situation like this has happened with the Grammys. A lot of them have to do with awards that have made you scratch your head, or you've just wondered why they weren't eligible to begin with. For instance, back in the 80s, Whitney Houston was not eligible for a Best New Artist Award, even though her debut album is one of the biggest selling albums of all time, garnered a ton of hits off of it. She was ruled ineligible because of the fact that she had sung on Jermaine Jackson's song If You Say My Eyes Are Beautiful, which came out before her album came out. Therefore, technically, she was ruled ineligible to be Best New Artist. The same situation happened with Richard Marx, who would have been a shoo-in back in the 80s for his debut album, which also had a bunch of hits, including Hold On to the Night and Don't Mean Nothing and a few others. But he was ruled ineligible because he had shown up on someone else's recording as well. That's one of those weird rules about Best New Artist, is that you have to come out with your album first. You can't have been introduced with another album. Same situation happened with Snoop Dogg, where Snoop Dogg was on Dr. Dre's Chronic album, and then Doggy Style came out. So, strange how it works sometimes. Now, as far as head scratchers go, 1990 was a really weird year. 1990 was the year that the Grammy Awards decided to first do a heavy metal album award. That was also the year that Metallica broke through into the mainstream with the Black Album, with Enter Sandman and a bunch of other songs. You would have figured that Metallica would have won Heavy Metal Album of the Year that year. However, the awards committee decided to give it to Jethro Tull, which is not exactly a heavy metal band. They were more like hard rock with a flute. It doesn't really work, but that was one of those awards where everybody went, what? And it still stands to this day. There is one award where also that year you were left scratching your heads, but the award's since been vacated, and that was for Best New Artist yet again. Here was who was nominated that year: Tone Loc, the Indigo Girls, Nena Cherry, Soul to Soul, and the eventual winner of the awards, the infamous Milli Vanilli. After their big scandal came out, the award was vacated, but still, you were left wondering why they had even won the award to begin with. And also remember, back in 2014, Macklemore won Best Rap Album over Kendrick Lamar. So even in recent memory, this has happened. Things being ruled ineligible by the Grammy Awards and various omissions will forever and ever happen because the Grammy Awards are basically controlled by a lot of older people who have no idea about most of the music that they actually nominate, which is why a lot of middle-of-the-road, what we used to call adult contemporary music, ends up winning for the year, even though a lot of independent labels, a lot of rap albums, etc., should have won in certain years. Until that changes and the voting block on the Grammys actually go lower in age, you're still going to get the same thing. You're going to get situations where Metallica gets beaten out by a 70s hard rock band with a flute for certain awards, or when rap albums that should not have really been nominated to begin with ended up winning over albums in which everybody and their grandmother said was the best rap album for that year. This will continue to happen. What the Grammys need to do is they need to make their voting block a lot younger, which is why they are sometimes nicknamed the Grannies and not the Grammys. Hopefully they will change that eventually, much like the Oscars have gone younger in age in order to correct some glaring omissions that they have done, but we will see. Now, we are going to make a case for Joan Baez to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. To reiterate numerous times, in order to be considered for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you would have to have had your album out, your first album out, at least 25 years prior to you being eligible. Joan Baez has been around since the 1960s. Her and Joni Mitchell were probably the two biggest queens of folk music, or the counterculture music, back in the 60s. Joni Mitchell is in, and has been for a while. So there should really be no reason why Joan Baez should not be in. She is one of the counterculture's biggest troubadours. Her, along with Pete Seeger, Peter, Paul and Mary, Joni Mitchell, and Bob Dylan, and a host of others, made the music that was the anthem for the counterculture movement back in the late 60s. She was and is actually still a political activist, an environmental activist, a civil rights activist. She sang at the March on Washington. She basically walks the walk. Amnesty International actually has an award named after her. For those reasons alone, she should be in. And this year, she is actually eligible. Now, there is a fan vote. You can vote if you want to at rockhall.com/vote. That's rockhall.com/vote. You get to vote every single day up until December 5th. You can pick 5 out of the 19 eligible acts every day. So you can switch up every other day if you want to. But make your voice heard and vote for Joan Baez to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Also, curious side note for those who did not know, Joan Baez dated Bob Dylan back in the 60s and Steve Jobs. Yes, that Steve Jobs. It happened back in the 80s, and supposedly Steve Jobs was going to ask Joan Baez to marry him, but didn't quite work out that way. She actually sang at his memorial service, and they were friends right up until he passed away. So, who knew? Joan Baez kept some interesting company. But like I said before, she should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have scant few women in the Rock Hall to begin with, and even fewer in terms of folk music. She deserves it. She's been around a long time, and she's influenced numerous folk rock women up until this day, and that is why she should be included to sit right next to Joni Mitchell into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Quick hit album review time. This week we are reviewing Tove Lo's new album, Lady Wood. This is her second album after her breakthrough last year. This album is a lot like that's Robin Swedish pop dance music style. Not quite Britney Spears. Britney Spears is a little more American funky, for lack of a better word. Swedish pop music is dance music, sounds almost disco-y, but not quite there. This is actually a really good album, and it's absolutely suited to Tove Lo's vocal style. Her range is mid-range. She doesn't stray too much out of it. She knows her limits. She's not one of those people who's going to go and give you a whole bunch of auto-tuning in order to make her voice seem like it's a lot better than it is. What you hear is basically what you get. She knows her strength. She stays with it. The songs are rather infectious. I would check out, before you buy the album, Cool Girl, True Disaster, Lady Wood, Keep It Simple, and Flashes. And then I would just buy the album. It is a very well done album from the youngster. I would absolutely buy Tove Lo's new one, Lady Wood. Okay, record store, new release time. This coming week, you get some big ones. Tribe Called Quest, their last album, as it turns out. That will be coming out this next week. Also, the new one from 90s New Age Mega Monsters, Enigma. Sting comes back with a new album, which is a lot more rockin' than the last few that he's put out. There is a new live album from the Rolling Stones, just in case you couldn't get enough of all the other live albums that the Stones have put out. The ones that I'm really looking forward to are the new albums from Superjoint, Luke Temple, and Martha Wainwright. Those should be rather interesting. Can't wait to get my hands on those. The earworm this week, there's only one, and it actually comes from Sting. It's his new single, I Can't Stop Thinking About You. You should check it out. It actually brings Sting back to being Sting as we remember him. And that is it in terms of this week's episode. We will talk with you next week, and here comes my older voice to let you know all that good stuff that you come to expect. Have a good week, everybody. That is it for this week's episode. Our website is theentertainmentgig.com. Our Facebook page is at The Entertainment Gig. We are on iTunes and Google Play at The Entertainment Gig, but we are also on SoundCloud at CJBT-Productions and on YouTube at CJBT Productions, which has a slideshow of my photography, which you can find on Facebook at CJBT Photography, and the portfolio at cjbtproductions.zenfolio, that's zenfolio.com. And that is it. We will talk with you next week. Take care.